Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to talk about what happened, kind of the big stories from the first weekend of Overwatch World Cup Qualifiers for the 2023 World Cup. And then we're going to take a look ahead at this upcoming weekend of matches and talk about the kind of big games that are coming up this weekend. A lot of interesting stuff going on in the World Cup. Obviously there's been some not as great things going on involving the World Cup, but largely I would say largely the event has been positive, and I've been really enjoying it so far. But let's jump in first and let's talk about what happened last week. So I'm going to throw up the standings from the first weekend of action. You can see where all the teams are in the EMEC region first. You can see in EMEC A, France sitting atop 4-0 plus 7. They had that big win against Denmark to close out the weekend in the EMEC region. They currently are the favorite, I would say, to get out of this group as a top seed. I believe the only real challenge they have left is Great Britain, but that's really it. They should be able to beat everyone else pretty easily. In EMEC B, you can see Saudi Arabia sits atop at 4-0 plus 7. Finland just behind them at 3-1 plus 5. The big shocker in this group, of course, is Sweden, who are sitting at 0-3 minus 5, a single map win in this tournament, and it came against Turkey. They got 2-0'd by Norway, they got 2-0'd by Finland, so they're kind of on thin ice. They really do not have a lot of room for error at this point in time. They really need to kind of get their stuff together if they want to have any chance. They have not yet been officially eliminated, but it is going to be very tough for them to get and move on. Iceland, unfortunately, has been eliminated. No Iceland moving on, but they sit there at the bottom, 0-4 minus 7. So Sweden has a couple spots that they can try to move up. They still have to play Poland and Iceland, and they still have to play Germany and Saudi Arabia. So they got some toughies in there, but they also have some easier matches that they could maybe try to kind of get some results going, and maybe things and dominoes fall their way and they make it. But it'll be tough for them going forward. Moving over to the APAC region and APAC A, you have Japan and South Korea still sitting undefeated. Neither of them have lost a map yet. Japan at 3-0 plus 6. South Korea 2-0 plus 4. Then you have Hong Kong at 2-1 plus 2. Those three seem to be the pretty clear-cut top three teams in this region. Chinese Taipei, Indonesia, and Philippines have had zero luck against any of those teams. And so it seems pretty clear that South Korea will probably win that group, barring some major upset by Japan. And then Japan will probably get second, Hong Kong third, and the other three will be fighting it out there towards the bottom to see maybe if one of them can steal that third and final spot. In APAC B, India and Australia sitting at the top at the moment, though India and Australia will be matching up still in this upcoming weekend. Thailand just outside of that top two at 2-1 plus 3, and then you have New Zealand and Malaysia still in the hunt. New Zealand 1-2 minus 2, Malaysia 1-2 minus 3, and Singapore, unfortunately, at 0-3 minus 5 is eliminated. They cannot advance out of APAC B. Moving over to the Americas, America A, unsurprisingly, Team USA at the top, 3-0 plus 5. The only map they lost was kind of a troll map against Mexico, though I don't think that, Mexico looked bad either. Mexico just below them at 2-1 plus 3. Canada at 1-1 with a 0 differential. They, of course, open up against the U.S., so that's why they have a loss. Puerto Rico at 1-1, 0 as well. They also had to play the U.S. Costa Rica at 1-2 minus 2, and Guatemala closing out that group at 0-3 minus 6. It'll be interesting to see kind of where that group goes. Like I said, Team USA, after beating Canada, really no one there should be much of a threat to them, but who gets those second and third spots will be interesting to see. Finally, in America B, Brazil and Colombia sit atop, both undefeated. Brazil, very good-looking team. A lot of really nice coordination from that group. Colombia, it really is the EQO show. I thought that he might be the difference maker for that Colombia roster, and he has been. He's been phenomenal in this World Cup. He has been pretty much untouchable. He has been dominating every team and every matchup he's had so far in the World Cup. So they, right now, are the two scariest teams. But then you have Chile just behind them, and then Peru, Argentina, and Ecuador closing out that group. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens there as well. I'm very intrigued to see how far Colombia can go, because so far they've looked very good on the back of EQO, but can they keep that going? We'll see as we go forward. I think it's been a really fun first weekend. Like I said, there are some good and some bad to kind of break down when you look at the overall event. But I think generally speaking, I think the production very, very good. I think the casting's been phenomenal. And I think the World Cup's tough because a lot of games just end up being kind of 2-0 stomps. You get a good game every so often. You get a nice 2-1 or a really close 2-0, but usually there's some disparity. But when you get those big banger of matches that kind of come up, it's always fun to watch and see what happens. Let's take a look at the schedule for this weekend, and I'll highlight some of the games that I think look to be some of the better games in the kind of slate. And we're going to start with the EMEC region. Just like last week, they're going to be starting off on Thursday, and everyone else will be starting off on Friday. So check your times, check the local time for when they start for you. Just like last video, I will link in the description to the schedule for this week. But you can see in EMEC A, Thursday, you have Portugal, Italy, Spain, Denmark, and France, Belgium. Spain-Denmark could be a decent game, but I don't think there's a ton to get excited about there. I think Denmark and France are pretty clear-cut favorites in that, kind of their two matchups. Portugal, Italy, the two weaker teams, so I don't really think much of that one. Though Italy did get a win over Spain, which is a pretty big deal last week. Taking a look at Friday, you can see you have Portugal, Denmark, Netherlands, Belgium, Italy, Great Britain, and France, Spain. Once again, not a great slate of matches. France, Spain could be okay. Netherlands, Belgium could be okay, but the other ones I think should be pretty one-sided in favor of Denmark and Great Britain. On Saturday, Spain versus Great Britain, Netherlands versus Portugal, and Italy versus Denmark. I think Spain-Great Britain's an interesting matchup. I think those are two teams in kind of interesting spots. Spain still punching up maybe more than people expected them to. They look to be in that kind of top 5 of this group. They did get a win over the Netherlands, which is nice. Great Britain has looked very, very good. They've looked very strong. I don't think there's really much reason to think that they will lose this matchup, but it's an interesting one. It's a close matchup, I think, potentially. Potential upset there. I don't think it will happen, but I do think Great Britain, Spain could be a decent match. And then on Sunday, you have Denmark, Netherlands, Belgium, Italy, Spain, Portugal, and Great Britain versus France. Denmark, Netherlands could be a pretty good matchup. There's two teams that are coming off decent performances in the last World Cup. Denmark still looks very, very good. Netherlands has struggled a bit more than I expected them to, but I think overall they're still a pretty good team, all things considered. Great Britain versus France, I mean, that's an age-old rivalry. You can tell they're putting a lot of the big matchups, the ones that they expected to kind of have the biggest impact here towards the end of this EMEC region. But Great Britain versus France, really good matchup there. I think France should take that one, but I don't want to write off Great Britain because I think this group is very, very tough. I think there's a good chance that there's an upset here if you want to consider Great Britain winning an upset. But I think it's a good matchup there. I think it's a good weekend for that region, and so that's always nice to see. Moving on to EMEC B, they kick off the weekend with Norway versus Saudi Arabia. Then you have Turkey versus Germany, Sweden versus Poland, and Finland versus Iceland. Norway, Saudi Arabia has my attention. Norway has been surprisingly good, considering we didn't think much of them as a team going into this tournament. Saudi Arabia has looked phenomenal. They've basically been untouched, with a little bit of an exception from Finland. Finland was able to push Saudi Arabia, but Saudi Arabia was very, very good. So can Norway be the team that finally knocks Saudi Arabia down a bit? We'll see in that one. Turkey versus Germany, Sweden versus Poland, Finland versus Iceland. Don't think much to talk about there. On Friday, of Germany versus Sweden, Finland versus Poland, Iceland versus Turkey. I don't think Sweden versus Germany should be a great matchup, though it is interesting just in case, Sweden's got to win their games if they want to continue in this World Cup. If they want to have any chance at qualifying for the main event, they have to have a really good weekend this weekend, so I will have my eyes on that game. But I think Finland should beat Poland with ease. Turkey, they look better than Iceland right now, so they'll take that one. On Saturday, of Saudi Arabia versus Germany, Poland versus Norway, Turkey versus Finland, and Sweden versus Iceland. Once again, no particular games I'm, incredibly intrigued by, but Sweden, Iceland could be interesting, and I think Saudi Arabia, Germany could be interesting as well. And then on Sunday, you have Germany, Poland, Turkey, Norway, and Sweden, Saudi Arabia. Sweden, Saudi Arabia would have been a more interesting matchup if Sweden was looking as good as we thought they would, but they have not looked nearly as good as kind of what we expected from them. But let's just say Sweden is a good weekend. They go on this miracle run. This game could be the thing that determines how well they do and if they can actually make it into the World Cup proper. So it'll be interesting to see, right? I think it probably won't end up that way, unfortunately, but could be interesting just to see kind of where we go when we actually get to that matchup on Sunday. Moving on to the APAC region. APAC A, it's been a pretty one-sided thing, as you could tell from the standings we looked at the beginning, but Indonesia versus Chinese Taipei and Philippines South Korea on Friday. I think South Korea is the favorite there, but I think that first game really is anybody's game. On Saturday, Indonesia versus South Korea, Chinese Taipei versus the Philippines, and Japan versus Hong Kong. So Indonesia, South Korea probably is going to be a South Korea win. Chinese Taipei versus Philippines could be interesting. I'd lean towards Chinese Taipei. Japan, Hong Kong, a very interesting matchup. Battle for the number 2 seed out of this APAC A group, so big matchup there. And then on Sunday, you have Hong Kong versus Chinese Taipei, Philippines versus Indonesia, and Japan versus South Korea. So very likely there's going to be an undefeated team in this group, a 1-loss team in this group, and a 2-loss team in this group. Japan or Hong Kong, one of those teams is going to most likely be a 1-loss, and one's going to be a 2-loss. So it's a big weekend for Japan. They have to play both Hong Kong and South Korea. It's a tough ask, but if they can get past Hong Kong, they should be in a pretty good spot to get that number 2 seed. But I definitely have my eyes on both of their matches this weekend. Moving on to APAC B, it opens up on Friday with India versus Australia, which I think is a really interesting match of the 2 top teams of the group right now. Only one of them can move on with ease, I guess, as the number 1 seed. The other ones are going to have to fight with Thailand for kind of number 2 spot, which will be interesting to see. Malaysia, New Zealand, and Thailand, Singapore, they're closing out on Friday. On Saturday, it's Australia versus Malaysia and India versus Thailand. I think India versus Thailand could be an interesting one. Depends on what we see, but right now I do lean in Thailand's direction. Though, like I said, could be interesting. And then Sunday, you have Singapore versus India, and you have New Zealand versus Australia. Big rivalry between those two, New Zealand and Australia, historically 2 countries that were rivals. I remember 2019 when they played in the preliminaries. It was a very fun, very exciting matchup there, so I have my eyes on that one as always. And then closing out with the Americas region. On Friday, it's Puerto Rico versus Canada and Costa Rica versus the U.S. I think Canada and U.S. are pretty clear favorites in their matchups, but I've been surprised before. On Saturday, it's the USA versus Guatemala, Puerto Rico versus Costa Rica, and Canada versus Mexico. I think USA, Puerto Rico should win their matchups. I think they've looked better so far. Canada versus Mexico, that really is kind of a battle for the potential number 2 seed. One of those 2 teams would love to be that number 2 seed. They both would love it, honestly, but only one can. And for Canada, Mexico is really the only big test they have this weekend. I think Puerto Rico is decent, but I think Mexico so far has looked to be a little bit better than they have. So Canada, Mexico, going to be an interesting one. And then on Sunday, it closes out with Guatemala versus Canada and Mexico versus Puerto Rico, which I think Mexico, Puerto Rico, once again, big matchup. Winner of that one could be the number 3 seed. I think that's why it's interesting that game's the last one. Really, everything could be up for grabs there in that final day in this region. And then in America B, Friday, it's Peru versus Brazil, Chile versus Ecuador, and Colombia versus Argentina. I think Brazil, Chile, Colombia have looked like the top 3 teams so far, so I'd pick the 3 of them to take their games. Saturday, Argentina plays Ecuador, and Colombia plays Chile. I think Colombia, Chile, banger of a matchup. Can EQL be stopped, or will he continue to ravage the group? That's really what I'm looking out for. And then Sunday, you have Ecuador, Peru, Brazil, Colombia, and Chile, Argentina. Brazil versus Colombia is definitely the big matchup on Sunday that I'm very excited for. That is probably the single APAC game that I am most excited, not APAC, America's region game that I'm most excited for this weekend. I think it looks really interesting, really, really good. I think both those teams are really interesting. They're 2 of my favorite teams to just kind of keep my eye on going into the main event, and so this will be really fun to see. So that's the schedule for this weekend. Going to be much of the same stuff that we had last weekend, so it'll be fun, it'll be interesting, and I'm excited for it. I don't think I'll get to watch the games as much as I did this first weekend, but I'll definitely try to get in as many as I can because I love the World Cup. But let me know your thoughts on what we've seen in the comments down below. Let me know the biggest shocker to you so far. Is it Sweden? Is it something else? Whatever. Let me know in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video and want more like it in the future, consider liking and subscribing, as your support does help out a bunch with the channel. But that's going to be all from me for today. Thank you all once again. I hope you're all staying safe and staying healthy. And until next time, bye-bye.